Happy Friday, OUSD. Good to have you with us. My name is Nicole Knight. I'm the Executive Director of ELLMA, our English Language Learner Multilingual Achievement Office. We're really excited today to go deep into a topic that we've touched on in our last several webinars, which is student talk, and really thinking about what can that look like for distance learning. So yeah, excited to go deep today. If you're just logging on, please let us know who you are, your name, your school, and then also chat us a strategy that you've been using to try and foster some student talk during distance learning, so we can kind of see some ideas that you have. And just a note, we have this tiny URL, .com/student-talk-distance, that will take you to this slide deck, right? The most common question that we get in these webinars is, where do I get a copy of this slide deck? Because it's full of really great links and ideas. And so you can open it now if you like and follow along, or just sit back and relax and watch and know that you can access this later. We will also at the end be sharing the link to the English Language Learner page of Teacher Central, where you will see the recorded version of this webinar, as well as all of our other webinars. This is our fifth and the last of our spring, series that we kind of pulled together really quickly, as everyone has in this new context. So again, thanks for joining us. My name is Nicole Knight again. I'm going to pass it on to my colleagues to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump in. Pass it to Rita.
Hi, I'm Rita Pope. I'm a language specialist in elementary in the ELLMA department. I'm going to pass it to Sonia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sonia, and I'm a secondary language specialist, and I will pass it to Danielle.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Danielle Pastrana, one of the elementary language specialists working in the ELLMA department, and I'm going to pass it over to one of our guest presenters, Jenny Kim.
Hi, I'm Jenny Kim. I'm a first grade teacher at Manzanita Community School, and I'll pass it to Lorelei.
Good morning, I'm Lorelei. I teach English language development at United for Success.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Mike Ray. I'm the ELD Services Coordinator in the ELLMA department.
Right, did we get everyone of our panelists? Okay, so thank you all for being here again. If you're just joining us, please let us know who you are, where you teach, and then some strategies you've been using. We have some ideas here. So Flipgrid, and we'll be talking about that. We love Flipgrid. Some folks using Zoom sessions and using the breakout rooms of Zoom sessions. A teacher calling directly to talk to students. So great to hear what you're doing, and please continue to share both your questions and your ideas. Mike, you want to go to the next slide? Okay, so what we're going to cover today, our guiding question that's grounding this, is how do we adapt student talk to a distance learning context? We know that the year is wrapping up. We also know that distance learning in some shape or form is going to continue until next year. So we appreciate you joining us and thinking about what this is going to look like for your current practice, but also ongoing. We're going to be looking at a little bit of why student talk is crucial, especially for our English language learners and our academic language learners, our ELLs and our ALLs. And then think about what are some of the strategies that you all have been learning, and we're kind of culling and sharing with you of what that looks like in online contexts, how to get increased participation and help students take risks, and again, those best practices. And before we move on, I do want to share some really exciting news that you may have heard already. It's in the presses. Oakland's Unified, along with the City of Oakland, launched a big fundraising campaign with the goal of raising $12.5 million, and actually reached that in one day, thanks to a $10 million donation from the CEO of Twitter. So what that's going to mean for us is we're going to be able to go to be a one-to-one district starting next fall. There may be some lag time in getting Chromebooks because, as you know, there's, you can imagine, there's a big demand on those orders. But it's really important for this context because we can start to talk about what does it look like actually to go online with all kids, because that is where we're heading. So we'll be talking about different options for families who aren't quite there yet and don't have connectivity, but we do have confidence that we're going to get to a place where we are finally closing the digital divide. So wanted to share that great news and then pass it on to Michael Ray.
Thanks, Nicole. So to start, I just want to review some of what the research says about why student talk is crucial for our English language learners, but also for all our academic language learners. It increases engagement, a big deal, especially during distance learning. When you give kids a chance to talk, it deepens understanding of content and cements it in the memory. It's very important for developing discipline-specific academic language and all language. It develops deeper reasoning skills and listening skills. It keeps the work on collaboration and social skills going during the distance time, very critical because there just aren't as many contexts for that. And then it also can be used for an assessment so we can understand what kids know and what they still don't know. And finally, it just provides a high cognitive demands. You may have felt tired after a good conversation, and that's because of all the different things you're doing. Thinking, preparing responses, reacting to physical responses from others. Another important aspect to talk about is these two types of student talk, one-way output and interaction. So they're very related, and they're both very important. One-way output could be speaking or writing. We're focusing on the speaking part primarily today. And what it means is that one person just outputs a single response without engaging in any kind of back and forth. It's easier for distance learning because it is hard to set up those interaction opportunities compared to just asking the student to record a video or something like that. Typical protocols might be a choral response and repetition where you mute everybody and have them repeat or chorally respond to some important academic language or idea. You could have a whip around in a Zoom where kids just take turns introducing themselves, sharing some thought about something. The purpose is to develop content language and academic language, content knowledge and academic language, and also for you to be able to check for understanding. Interaction is more complex than one-way output because it involves a back and forth. If you look at the little picture there, you see the gears above the two heads. So it's kind of like you're co-constructing an idea. So you want at least two people involved, and it has to go back and forth at least 3 times. I talk, you talk, I talk, so that we're actually working to build an idea. So that's interaction, also just called academic discussion as a shorthand. It's obviously harder for distance learning, but it's almost more critical than ever because of the distance learning context that we try to create these situations for kids to share their ideas and build ideas together. Some typical protocols you might use are just a whole class academic discussion on a Zoom around a rich prompt, preferably like a more open-ended prompt. And then something that you'll see later referred to by Rita when she's talking about an activity from Ms. Mack at MPA Primary, where there's sort of a fishbowl turn and talk, which then moves to a whole class elaboration or add-on. That could be a nice distance learning. Socratic seminar could be run in a Zoom or in breakout rooms. So the purpose of the interaction, it covers a lot of what the one-way output is, but then it adds developing skill and using discussion to build ideas, which is so critical in all of our work contexts and thinking context, and also to build ideas together to solve problems. We also want to point out the way that one-way output, those single outputs, they really build up our language and our content knowledge so that we're more capable of doing interaction. But then the interaction also facilitates the one-way output. So if you had to do a writing assignment after an academic discussion, it might go better. We're going to move into the main pieces of our presentation now, and we're going to do it in chunks according to the essential practices for ELL achievement, and our focus is on 3 of those today. One is integrated and designated ELD in distance learning. That's an essential practice 2. Another is the asset-based approach. That is seeing the linguistic and cultural assets that kids bring and really leveraging them for their learning. And then the whole child, in which we try to make sure that students feel safe, they feel okay about taking risks, and they just feel welcome, even in a distance learning space. So we'll see some examples of that today as well. And now I'd like to turn it over to
me.
to Rita. Yes, sorry, Rita.
Hi, I'm Rita, and I'm an elementary ELLMA specialist. So we're going to start today with our Essential Practice 5, Whole Child. And really it's about attending to the needs of the whole child, leveraging family and community supports and ways to support students' non-academic needs so they can fully engage in distance learning. So we might ask ourselves, how can we leverage family and community supports to help our students feel grounded and to be in the right frame of mind to learn, to be excited about attending their online classes, and to be fully participating when they're in their online classes with their classmates. So on the next slide, I wanted to let you know that this is a document called the Essential Practices for English Language Learners, Distance Learning Edition. And everything that we're doing is kind of framed around this. This is available in the slide deck. So as you can see on the bottom of each slide is the URL link to get to the slide deck. And then within there, you can either click on the link on the left or on the image, and you can follow along with this document. But for today, we're going to be looking particularly at this one indicator within Whole Child. Plan by anticipating the very real barriers to student engagement with a particular focus on digital access. So if we can move on to the next slide. One major barrier we all know we're experiencing in schools is access to Chromebooks and the internet. And many schools are trying their best to close that gap by reaching out to parents and providing pickup times and trying to help with the access. Today we're going to hear from, or I'm going to actually represent this teacher because he was unable to attend today, a teacher who was relentless in this regard to ensure that all his students had digital access and had incorporated ways to connect to parents and keep students engaged and wanting to come back for more. So introduce you to Angel Muñez. He's a first grade bilingual teacher at Greenleaf, and this is a picture of his Zoom class. And he has been able to achieve 100% attendance or near attendance daily and 100% engagement. So let's find out how he did this. It's kind of grouped into 3 categories. The first is digital access for all. So the first thing he did is reached out to his parents and made sure they had internet access and technology. He also even helped parents get connected to the internet provider if maybe they had a Chromebook but they didn't have the internet. Communication with parents was really important. So for the daily Zoom calls, he would send a morning reminder. At the beginning of that Zoom call or meeting, he would let students connect with each other while he connected with parents. So that was a little bit of SEL for kids. And he early on realized, you know, what is the best application that parents are already using that I can connect with my parents. And he discovered that WhatsApp, a lot of his parents were using that. So he set up an account, WhatsApp account, and then any parents who weren't on WhatsApp, he either texted or he emailed them. So he had those ways to connect to parents. And so at the beginning of the call, he would connect with them in whichever format that was easiest for them to get the information. The other thing he did is he kept the Zoom link the same every day for that week. So parents knew, okay, I'm always logging into the same Zoom link with the ID and password. And then the last area he really looked at was, he tried to boost engagement. So at first, he basically taught the students how to use the Zoom platform in a really fun and engaging way so that they were really comfortable. So when he got to the content, they were fluid. And also for his daily lessons, he would obviously teach content, but he would also do a fun activity every day to get students really motivated and so that they want to join into the class. And I wanted to just point out to you that he was kind enough to record himself. There's about an 8-minute video, and it's linked here. And I really encourage you to take a peek at that later. He says more details on what I just described. And we're just really happy that he has this whole class coming every day. So the next area that we really wanted to focus on in Whole Child is to continue to think about those real barriers for student engagement. And so we really felt like setting up conditions for talk within the platform is really important. So even if you've got all your protocols down in your regular classroom, transferring them online is a little bit different for kids. So just go ahead and go through the normal kind of routines you would in your classroom, but in the platform format, so that they feel really comfortable and it's easy for them to engage. So I have a picture here of Ms. Mack from Madison Primary in East Oakland. She had a small group that she was working with. And one way to get the kids started was just a fishbowl. So she called on 2 students and asked them to answer a question and to have interaction, to go back and forth, what Mike was talking about before. And they had done that in the classroom, so they were familiar with that. But just doing it in the platform was a little bit different. And then she would break down the talk activities into steps for everybody, provide a language pattern or a language frame so they could get started. And then of course taught the whole class, these SEL things that we do to make each other feel comfortable when we're talking to each other. So yeah, you could nod, on a Zoom video call. Learn how to take turns. And then the kindness and respect, you can use your normal gestures. Maybe you do a shooting star when you really like what someone said, or whatever you might do in your classroom. But you could also use the reactions button and teach your kids how to, have the clapping hands for things that they really feel excited about. So just, remembering that step of setting up our routines and protocol in this new platform really helps students feel comfortable. So now we're going to pause for a moment and look at maybe answer a couple of questions that have come up, and also give you time to add any strategies or tools that you've used to increase engagement or access in distance learning. I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to answer some of these questions.
Yeah, so please pose your questions. The one little dialogue that was going on here was about devices. And so for those of you who logged on a little bit late, there was a big announcement this morning that Oakland has reached in one day the fundraising goal of $12.5 million thanks to a $10 million donation from the CEO of Twitter, which is going to bring us to be able to be a one-to-one district. And so my understanding from a meeting this morning with principals is that students will be allowed to hold on to their Chromebooks over the summer and into next year unless they are changing schools. So those who are going from elementary to middle school, middle to high school, etc. And so there should be communication coming soon, but wanted to let you know that's, because there is an acknowledgement here that our students need these devices in order to access learning. That's the big engagement right now in the chat, but if there are questions so far, please continue to pose them. We have a couple more stopping points, and then of course we'll take questions at the end. But let's continue for now.
All right, good morning, everyone. This is Danielle again from the ELLMA department. We're going to move on to our next section of our presentation, which revolves around our second essential practice, integrated and designated ELD. And we know that being out of the classroom presents a lot of challenges for daily practice and really for exposure to English for our language learners. So this essential practice really zeroes in on the importance of finding ways to ensure that our language learners are still able to practice with language even in distance. So we're going to go on the next slide and see a couple different more examples. So we ask ourselves, how do we do this? How do we really provide opportunities for students to talk in distance learning? And one way is by making sure that we're providing explicit language instruction. This can look several different ways, anything from really clearly stating the language objective that complements a content objective in a lesson, and also really explicitly calling out the language that students are going to need to be able to access content. That could be highlighting key vocabulary or providing sentence frames so that students who need them can use them to be able to exchange ideas. We linked in here some language resources that have things like differentiated sentence frames that can really help in this process. And in a moment, we're going to see some examples of what this looks like live and in action in our classrooms here in OUSD. So we're going to go to the next slide, please. And I'm really excited to introduce fantastic teacher from Manzanita Community, Jenny Kim. She's going to be showing us in a minute some work that her students have been doing to build on and off of each other in order to exchange ideas. And I'll let her set up the framing for it, and just want to let you know that the video, the full video, is linked on the image that you see on the screen. So if you want to watch it in its entirety, by all means, you have access to this slide deck and can do so, but we're going to watch about two-minute snippets of it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny so she can set us up for the first section we're going to see.
Hi, everyone. So I wanted to continue practicing student talk during distance learning. So while we were still in school, routine practices were already in place, such as speaking in complete sentences, or we called it college talk, practicing academic language using sentence frames in all content areas, using think, pair, share, and triads to practice revoice and add on. Students also practiced using academic language in their daily writing with book logs using sentence frames. And students also practice close reading, where we use short nonfiction passages, mostly related to our current social studies or science units that students had prior knowledge of, so there was higher engagement. And so in the video, you'll see us practice revoice and add on. And we were in the middle of our GLAD rainforest unit when school closed, so students had prior knowledge of the rainforest, but learning about the okapi was new. And in the video, there are 3 former newcomer students, 6 ELLs, and 5 EO students.
Awesome, and Mike's going to set us up. So quick transition, technology transition, and here we go. We're starting at second 8 and stopping at second 2:10.
Since we're practicing listening to each other, so we're going to be doing the revoice and add on. So you're listening to your friends, okay? So I want to see you looking at the speaker and think about the fact that they are sharing. And then if you can think of a new fact about the okapi, then I want you to raise your hand and revoice what the first person shared, and then you're going to add on. So you can say, one new fact I learned, and then say your fact. And then the next person can share, I heard so-and-so say, I also know, okay? So who has a fact that they learned about the okapi? Okay. Lavray, go ahead.
One fact I learned, and I was really sad that they have poor eyesight.
But is that okay though? Even though they have poor eyesight, can they still look for food?
Yeah,
How?
they're sense. They have really good sense.
Right. So share your facts with us.
One fact is okapis have poor eyesight, but they can still smell.
Yes, excellent. Okay, I love how you shared that. Thank you. Okay, so who can revoice and add on? Thank you for covering your mouth, Mona. Okay. Leba. So I heard
Lavray said one fact is okapis have poor eyes, but they can smell. And I also learned that okapis are found in Africa.
excellent. Let's give her some snaps. I like how you're all looking at the speaker. Okay.
All right, and now we're going to fast forward a little bit further into the lesson, into the exchange rather, and hear how our students continue to build off of each other. So thanks for your patience with our technology moment here, and we'll catch the last 2 minutes or so of the video. And again, for those who are tuning in, this is from Jenny Kim's classroom, first grade teacher at Manzanita Community, and we definitely appreciate her sharing all the hard work that she's been doing with her students. So hopefully technology will cooperate. If not, we'll move on in a few seconds. All right.
Okay.
Giving it one final try. I've seen some praise in the comments from Jenny. We agree. It's very exciting and really impressive. So we're going to give her a chance afterwards to share some reflections as well. I'm going to say maybe in the interest of time, we'll pause it there, and then we can just have Jenny share what was happening in the video. As we all know, we run into technological hiccups and barriers all the time. So Mike, if I can have you go to the next slide. I'll share with folks and then have Jenny give Jenny a chance to share back some of the scaffolds that we saw her doing. So you saw some of this in the first section, and it just continues on in the section that we were unable to see. But she set up an activity for students to converse with each other based off of a complex text they used during a close reading done earlier in the week. So this was in a progression of lessons. The students moved into sharing using oral sentence frames to promote academic language use. She did a great job of probing students to elaborate on the response and use complete sentences when necessary. And then really did a great job of, you guys can watch this in the video if you go back and play it, but a really great job of using positive reinforcement. There's a really sweet moment where all the students are snapping it up for their classmates, and that really encourages participation, even if language isn't perfect from language learners. So I do want to give Jenny the last word and share any thoughts and or summarize what happened in the part that we missed, but any thoughts or reflections on doing this again in the future.
So normally I hate being videotaped, but the effective filter was low because it was just myself and the students. So overall, this was a valuable learning experience, and I plan on doing more close readings during Zoom so my students continue to practice student talk and so I can better my teaching practices. So of course, after watching it, there's a lot of teaching points for me to work on, in particular, thinking about when to correct grammar and when to let it go so students can get their thoughts and ideas out, and also to do a better job at scaffolding at times.
All right. Thanks again, Jenny. We really appreciate you sharing. And again, we encourage you to go back later on in the slide deck and you can watch the whole video. I'm going to go on to the next slide. And in the example that we saw from Jenny, that was a synchronous example where students can use Zoom or Google Meet to interact live and in person, but we know that that's not always possible, right, with schedules and people signing on. So we wanted to give a few examples of how you can do this, still create opportunities for student talk in an asynchronous way. There's many apps that are available to do this, but one that we wanted to focus in on was called Flipgrid. So on the next slide, we're going to take a look at two strategies that work really well with Flipgrid. And Flipgrid is an app where you as a teacher can set up a prompt, you record yourself saying it, and then your students can record back responses. And the nice thing is that they can hear each other, they can hear their classmates, listen to the responses before creating their own response, and they also have the chance to re-record their responses many times as they want before they submit it. And then as a teacher, you get to also comment on their responses and give them feedback. So it's a nice way of interacting asynchronously. Many of us have heard of this strategy. It's called Stronger and Clearer. It's a great way to get students to learn from each other and build off as they strengthen and clarify academic ideas to, as we say, speak in paragraphs. So the way it works is students partner with a new person each time, and they build and borrow from the ideas and the language from their previous partners. And the goal is to make their answer, their response, stronger each time with better evidence, better examples and explanations, and also make it clear each time. Some examples might be using a topic sentence or more logical ways to organize thoughts and sentences and using precise words. So partners can also ask each other questions to elaborate and add more. And again, Flipgrid allows us to do this because you can record a student response, listen to it, and then add back on to your own response. And of course, this is a nice way to build things up to also write afterwards to a similar prompt. So they've had a lot of chances to orally listen, verbally process, and then bring it to writing. So that's a great strategy. The link included on this slide will give you a better rundown of how the protocol works. All right, so we wanted to share one more strategy on the next slide. That's called information gap. And again, this is a great one to use with Flipgrid in an asynchronous way. And the way it works is in information gap, students are required to communicate with each other to solve a problem or complete a task. And in these activities, this type of activity, the individual student does not have all the information needed to achieve the goal, and that's where the gap comes in. So you really need to be able to speak with and listen to and exchange ideas with other students in order to fill in that information gap. So the way it works briefly is students are instructed to draw or jot down something in lower elementary and upper elementary to record a summary of key points of their respective findings, again, using an app like Flipgrid. And then students get to listen back and forth to each other, jotting down notes, asking questions. And then finally, in breakout rooms, students use Zoom to ask each other questions to fill in those gaps. And we did want to just put a little note in that, and this has come up for a lot of folks, is it's really important to establish norms before using breakout rooms around respectful listening, respectful interactions. And if that doesn't feel comfortable, if it's too overwhelming, you can still have students interact on a Google Doc, adding responses back and forth, or an app like Padlet. And again, if you want more info on the strategy itself, it's linked into this slide right here. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Sonia, who will take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. So setting aside designated time for your English learners to practice the target language is really important, especially for your newcomer students. With distance learning, this could be done one-on-one via phone, a video app like Zoom or Flipgrid, or in a small group Zoom call. I'll lift up 2 examples of platforms which can be used to help students practice that target language. Next slide. As Danielle mentioned, Flipgrid or any other video platform is a really great way to have students practice the target language. First, be sure you're explicit about what the target language is. Second, give students a language resource, which we have linked in this slide deck, such as sentence frames to use when they're practicing the language. For example, in the task shown, I'm asking students to answer a prompt via video on Flipgrid using comparative language. And I provided them with sentence frames, which I expect them to use in their video. Okay, next slide. And just like in the classroom, it's important to provide students with feedback. If you can also ask students to do this for each other by providing each other with video comments. You could follow up via phone or set up a small Zoom call for more targeted practice. Okay, next slide. Next, I'd like to pass it to Lorelei Durr, a talented teacher at United for Success, who will share with us a tool that she's using with her newcomer students. Lorelei?
Good morning. Thank you, Sonia. I'm Lorelei. This tool that I wanted to share was from BrainPop ELL. And what I do is I assign students a video based on a particular language function or content that I want them to practice. And they listen to the videos and they write about it. And there's also this feature called Hear It, Say It, where students get to listen to a sentence and then they get to practice speaking. And then you can also give them feedback on the platform or online. So here's a little video, some examples.
So here I have assigned students an assignment to watch a video and to practice what's called the Hear It and Say It. Here's an example of a student's work that they turned into me. First, the students listen to the sentences and how they're pronounced, and then they have a chance to go ahead and record and listen to themselves. Let's listen to our first student.
Penguins are the fun and the money part of the world. As the air warmer, the ice melts.
So students have a chance to participate and to practice learning English, and you can also leave feedback here. There's a section where you can leave comments. Here you see the feedback I gave was to encourage him to keep on trying, and you can also leave feedback around pronunciation or other things that you're working on. Let's look at another student.
As the earth gets warmer, the ice will melt. These shirts are supposed to help endangered animals.
So here are two tools that I just used in my newcomer classes. My ELD 1 is a mix of newcomer and recent ELs, and they're just ways for them to continue practicing their speaking while we're not at school.
Great, thanks so much, Lorelai, for sharing that really great tool. So again, as Lorelai mentioned, Brain Pop Hear It and Say It feature is a really great way for your newcomer students to both hear and practice language. Next, I'll pass it on to Mike.
Hi, everybody. So we have been given examples so far that are really more in the full tech option, where kids have one or more Chromebooks in the house with internet access. And with the good news that we heard this morning, we'll be moving towards that very strongly in the fall. But there's also low tech and no tech situations that we should be thinking of. For example, if you look at number 1 under low tech, it says you could do a smartphone Zoom, because you can watch a Zoom on a smartphone. It's just not as convenient. So that's something to keep in mind. But maybe the kids just have a landline, at which point maybe you set up a conference call where you you call one student and then you add other students in. So if you could just take a couple minutes in the chat room and chat notices and wonderings about this little table and share any ideas you have.
As folks are sharing some ideas on this table, what they notice and what they wonder in terms of low tech and no tech, I just wanted to let everyone know that there weren't a lot of questions in this last section, but there were a ton of appreciations for Jenny and the teachers that have shown what they worked on. So I just wanted to highlight that while you're typing away. There is one question that's come up from Sonia's Thatcher. So she says, I'm not sure how to do a conference call. Is there a recommended platform? Mike, did you want to respond to that?
I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but basically what on an iPhone, and I'm sure this is true with Androids, you call somebody and then you say, okay, I'm going to call somebody else and add them on. And you can add quite a few people. So that would be a way of getting 2, 3, or 4 kids on a call with you around a specific task.
Is there anything else you want to highlight on this slide, Mike? That's the only question that's come in.
I do want to say that that some of the stuff that is so obvious in the main classroom is totally applicable too. So for example, if you think of language patterns to support talk, if those are part of a paper packet, so you have a standard set of language patterns to help academic discussions, it's like, I agree with you because, and so on. Those could be a really nice thing to include in the low tech and no tech options.
There's one other question. Does that respect the privacy of home numbers, or are those visible to students?
When you do a conference call, nobody can see the other numbers as far as I know.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So like I said before, this is the opportunity to kind of pause and to answer any questions. I think we've done that from this section so far. If you wanted to add any strategies or tools you're currently using to include student talk, go ahead and do that in the chat right now. But I think since there's not much coming through, we should just move on.
Hello, everyone again. As Rita mentioned, we're also going to have an opportunity at the very end to answer any final questions. So go ahead and keep on commenting in the chat room if anything comes up as we're speaking. We're going to move into the final section of the presentation, which is the essential practice number 4, the assets-based approach, which really focuses in on leveraging in on the linguistic and cultural assets that our students and families bring into the classroom. So if we go on to the next slide, we can take a look again back at this document that we keep on referring to, which is linked in here if you would like to take a look at it later on. But this particular section highlights the importance of having students read and learn in their home language with their families. This is an especially important tool that we can leverage in times of shelter in place. And in a moment, we're going to take a look at some examples of what that could look like. On the next slide, that we wanted to pause to share a really important point here. This is an image from Jim Cummins, it's the concept known as the common underlying proficiency. And Jim Cummins is one of the more prominent scholars in language acquisition. And what we wanted to share with this was that research really shows that skills that a student develops in their home language or in their first language, that includes literacy skills, are accessed and utilized as they develop proficiency in a second language. So while it's definitely concerning to us during times of distance learning that students don't have as much access to English speaking peers, it's really important that they continue to have opportunities to learn by building off the schema that they have in their home language, as those skills are transferable into English. So let's take a look at some concrete examples. Next slide, please. All right, so with this in mind, we wanted to emphasize the importance of seeing our students' families as funds of knowledge and really lift up their experiences and expertise to help their students learning at home. So this can take shape in several different forms. One example would be encouraging students and families to talk about a topic, an assigned topic that will be coming up in class later on in the week at home in their home language. This way, students can also have discussions with their families in the home language that are going to mirror what they're doing via Zoom, via Flipgrid, and it's going to prepare them more to talk about it in English, even if it's not their first language. And then finally, we can't overemphasize enough the importance of reading with family members in home language in order to support the development of literacy as well as comprehension skills that can then be transferred over into English later on. All right. And that actually brings us to the end of our presentation. So if there are any thoughts or questions that you'd like us to answer, now's the time to throw those in the chat. And then in a moment, we're also going to share our contact information. So if you do think of questions later on, you can always follow up with us. So I believe Nicole might be monitoring the chat. Any questions that are coming up?
No, I do want to give just a moment for people either again to share strategies or resources or questions, successes or challenges. And maybe we can go to the contact information now as people are doing that and see if there are any of those coming through chat. So again, you have access to the slide deck with the tiny URL. It doesn't show up on this slide, but it's on every other slide. It's tinyurl.com/student talk distance, right? And so you can find our contact information is linked here. Please feel free to reach out. We love to engage. We learn with you all, you know, working directly with students. We learn so much from you and with you. So it's an honor to support you. So if you want thought partnership or access to resources, then please feel free to do that. Also, Mike, would you click on the OUSD Teacher Central link there in the orange box? So you may have gone to Teacher Central. There is on the top green bar, you'll see distance learning, and that will take you to our ELL resources. This link takes you directly there. And so just to note that we're trying to house our most relevant resources. So the essential practices are linked there. We have some Google Drive folders with additional information if you scroll down, Mike. And here are some kind of easy buttons to apps that are particularly supportive of our language learners. And then finally, all the way down, you'll see links to our recorded webinars. So we have done 4 prior to today, and this will be linked by Monday at the latest. So you can feel free to, you know, watch more of our webinars. Just realizing my video wasn't on, sorry about that. And look through our materials. So some questions. Yes, we are going to be continuing to work to support schools and teachers throughout summer school, so you can expect some additional resources. In terms of summer PDs, as a district, we decided to take a pause on some of our plans to do professional development, but there are some opportunities. There will be professional developments for some curricular adoptions. So those of you who are doing EL education or benchmark, you'll be hearing about that soon. And then we're talking about reconvening some professional learning online in mid to late July. So prior to the school year, you can expect to see some offerings then. And Rita, if you see any others that I missed.
I think you covered it. There's a couple that just came through.
Okay, so lots of thanks. We thank you, teachers. I just have been so inspired by the innovation and just commitment to adjust to this new environment and to support our students and really take that equity lens and figure out what does this look like for our students. And so appreciate all of you and our panelists today. Anyone else want to share a last word? All right, have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you soon.